Good day, everyone. It's Alkali Shepherd. Today, I'll be introducing pivot tables to each and every one of us. So, at this point in time, the question anybody should be asking is, what is a pivot table? So, a pivot table can be so many things, actually. It just depends on what you're using it for. But in general, a pivot table is a special tool that allows you to summarize and explore data interactively by dragging and dropping. But today I'll be making use of pivot tables in Microsoft Excel. So if you're actually conversant with Excel, you can tell that data is mostly entered and stored in flat Excel tables, which most times contain as many columns and rows as possible. Now, it can be very difficult to get summarized information from them if you're actually not familiar with pivot tables. So what a pivot table does is it bridges this gap by giving you the ability to summarize your information and get precise analysis. Let me show you something. I have this particular table. This is actually data gotten from a particular source. So let me take you to the very last row. Now you can see I have 756 rows and I have 9 columns. So this is actually large data. This is actually large data. So let's say you want a summary. Let's say you actually want to see the total profit generated by a product called Chivita. Yeah, by a product called Chivita in a particular country called Nigeria. That is a summary you want here. Even you get it, you might take a lot of time to actually achieve the end results, right? But with the idea of pivot tables or with the initiation of pivot tables, that is easily solved because you can quickly just insert a pivot table out of this and achieve your end goal. So I really don't want to talk much. When we get hands-on, you'll definitely see what I am talking about, right? So this data is actually data gotten from 5 different African countries, whereby 6 products, 6 drink products are manufactured and distributed in these countries, right? So you can see these columns actually carry very important information as regarding these products that are created in these 5 African countries. The first column says number of crates sold. So this is where you can see the total number of crates of a particular product that has been sold in a particular country. Yeah. Here you can see the cost of a particular crate. So it's possible that prices differ for every product, right? You can also see the revenue per crate total cost that every drink has generated. You can see the total revenue also generated, and you can also see the total profit generated by a particular product. So this is where, or this is the data out of which we are going to be creating our pivot tables, and this is what we call the data source. We'll be carrying out so many summaries so you can see how a pivot table can be utilized. Now you can see the data source I have is actually in a tabular form. Yeah, and this is how I recommend you always have your data, but that doesn't mean you're restricted or you can only have your data source in a tabular form. You can also have it in a non-tabular form like this. It all depends on how you want it to be. But I always prefer having my data source in a tabular form because of certain benefits I enjoy. Subsequently, you'll be seeing some of them. Right? All right then. So let's quickly proceed. To insert a pivot table is the first thing I'll be showing us. So come to the insert tab at the very top here. Good. At the far left, you can see a pivot table icon. Click the drop down you can see there and select from table stroke range. When you select this, you can see it selects the entire table for me. And this is one of the benefits I've been talking about. If at all my data source was not to be in a tabular form, I would have to, manually select the range of values I have. That is in transaction two, right? You have to manually select the entire range of values you have, which might take time if you have so many rows like the one I have, right? So it's actually good you have it in a tabular form because while trying to insert a pivot table, it quickly just takes the entire length and breadth of the table for you. Good. So where do I want my pivot table? I want it to be in an existing worksheet. As you can see, I've created a sheet which I call pivots. So this is where I'll be creating every pivot table for this tutorial video. So I just quickly select this, then I come to pivots, then I select any of the cells, then come back here, then OK. And you can see we've created a pivot table. So once you've created a pivot table, you definitely see this interface and see it saying pivot table 1. This is the first pivot table I've created. To build the report, choose fields from the pivot table field list, right? So we're creating reports basically. All right then. So at the far left, you can see this pane. We call it a field list. We call this a field list because basically you work with fields in a pivot table, all right? Because we actually drag and drop fields to form the report and summaries we'll be creating today. So this area here, you can see a list of all the fields you have in your data source. So if I bring us back to our data source, you can see the columns we have spans from date down to profit. So a column is also called a field. They are used interchangeably. We can always use columns or we can always use fields. So try to understand what I'm saying. If I call a field or a column, they mean the same thing, right? So coming back to my pivot sheet, good. So you can see every field we have in our data source is actually listed here because the field is what we are going to be using to create these reports, right? So around here, you can see something like drag fields between areas below. So everything here is what you'll be dragging and dropping in all these segments to create a pivot table for ourselves. So at the top here, you can see we have a search bar. This basically helps you search for a particular field, right? So we might not really be making use of this because we don't really have much fields, but let's assume, or let's say you have up to about 30 fields in your own data source. You can see the search bar will come in very handy for you. So you can quickly just search. Let me just do that so you can see what I'm talking about. COUN. I have, you can see, I just typed out count and it can show me country, which is a suggestion as to what they think I'm trying to find. All right, then. So understanding how the layouts of a pivot table work, that is the filters, columns, rows, and values, is actually a step forward in becoming a pro in utilizing the pivot tables. All right, then. So like I said before now, pivot tables actually works by the dragging and dropping of fields in each of these layouts. So if you want to recreate a pivot, or if you want to make a pivot table or summary, all you just have to do is drag a field to a particular segment within this four chambers. You can see like that. So let's say I drag my country to columns, for example. Good. Now the column is going to be the first layout I'll be talking about. Now, whenever you drag a field to the columns, every information within that field forms a column in the new report you're trying to create or in the pivot table you're trying to create from your data source. Does that make any sense? If I drag products to rows, if I drag products to rows, now every information within the product, every information within the field forms a row in the new report on the new pivot table you are trying to create. So let me quickly take this out. All right, so let me insert another pivot table so you see something. So when I come back to my, okay, instead, let's make use of transaction two. So now to insert a pivot table, now you can see this one is, you can see the information I have here is in a non-tabular form. So for you to create a pivot table out of this, you have to highlight everything you have here. You can see what I'm doing. Good. So this is why I don't really like making use of a data source which is not in a tabular form, because you can't just go and insert and you expect the array to be selected automatically. You have to do the selection for yourself. So I come to insert, then I hit on pivot table. Good. So you can see this is the range I just selected. Then I can say existing worksheet. Then I come to pivots. Good. Then I can just select any of this cell. Then okay, so you can see I've successfully created another pivot table. But let me delete this. I just actually wanted to show you that you don't really have to make your data source in a tabular form before you can create pivot tables out of it. So I'll insert another pivot table out of this one. I come to insert, then I hit on pivot table. Good. So I want it to be in an existing worksheet, then okay. Okay, I hit on this. Then I come to pivots, then I select any cell, then I hit on OK. So you can see I've successfully created another pivot table. Good. So let me drag products to rows and so you can see something. Now, what did you observe? Every information within the product field forms a new row on the new report you are trying to create. So that is just the idea. Most times the fields we drag to the columns and rows are actually text fields. That doesn't mean you can't drag numeric fields to the rows and columns. You can actually do that. So let's say I want to see the profits that has been generated by every product, right? Let's say I want to see the profits that has been generated by every product. So I've successfully dragged and dropped my products in the rows. So what I want to now see is the profits that each of this product has made, right? So I can just drag the profits and drop in the values. And what did you see? Another column kind of just forms, right? So you can see what this is now showing us. It is showing us the sum of every profit that Aquarius has generated in all five countries. And this is a summary, and this is precise as possible. So if at all before now you don't have the idea of a pivot table, Might take you time before you achieve this particular result. But with a pivot table, as quick as possible, by just dragging and dropping, you have a lot of information to assimilate. So let's say I want to see the profits, or I want to see the total cost that has been incurred in every country, right? So let's say I drag, okay. The thing is, let me create another pivot table, but instead of having to always go back to your data source and insert a pivot table, you can as well just duplicate any of those pivot tables you have in the present sheet and continue from there. This is another way to insert a pivot table. So I can just come here and Control V. Good. And I've created another pivot table. So let me escape. Good. Now I have another pivot table here. So let me play with this one. Let me take out the product. I don't want this. Let me take out the profit. Okay. There are two ways you can take out fields. It's either you drag and drop outside, or you can just hit this drop down. Then you can see the remove field option. Then hit on this and the field goes. So like I said, I actually want to see the total profits that are, I mean, the total cost that has been incurred in every country, in each of the 5 countries. So I can quickly just drag country to columns. It all depends on how you want to present this, right? You can as well put your countries in the columns if this is what suits you better. You can drag your country to the columns and drag the total cost to values. And you can see you have a new report looking like this. This doesn't really sit well with me. I don't really like how it is looking. So I actually prefer my country to be in the rows. So I can quickly just drag my country to rows like this, and I think this is actually looking better and easier to assimilate than the previous one I created. So you can see from here, I can tell that um, in Egypt, over 122 million has been incurred as cost. And this is how you make summaries from a data source using a pivot table. All right, then. So these are actually one-dimensional tables. Let's see how we can create a two-dimensional table using pivot tables, right? So, okay. So let's say I want to actually see the total revenue this time around. I want to see the total revenue generated by every product disaggregated by the countries. How do I go about that? Let me quickly duplicate this pivot table again so I can have another pivot table to play around with. Let me just scroll down. Okay, so I would paste this here. Good. All right, then. So back to this. So like I said, I want to actually see the total revenue generated by every product disaggregated by the countries. Good. So let me quickly take out all these fields. I don't need them anymore. So what I want is the country to be, rather, I want the product in the rows. Good. And I want the country to be in the columns. This is what you call a two-dimensional table. A table that actually possesses column labels and row labels. You can observe when I added a row labels was presented, and when I added the column labels was presented. This is how I know if a table is a two-dimensional table or not, right? For one-dimensional table, you are most likely to see just one of these labels, either the row labels or the column labels. But for two-dimensional table, you tend to see both column labels and row labels present on it, right? So I actually want to see the total revenue. So I just scroll down. You can see I have total revenue value here, field here. So I drag the total revenue to values, and you can see I've actually made a summary out of the data source we had. So from here, I can make informed choices, or whichever company is is in charge of this data can now make informed choices from what they have. You can see they can know if they need to beef up production in a particular product or not, or if they actually need to step down their production in a particular product or not. All right, then. So let's say I actually want to see the total profits generated in every country is aggregated by the product. You see, that is just easy. Let me just duplicate this one so we can see how we go about that. So this is Control C. Then I come here, I Control V, then I escape. Good. I have another pivot table like this. Okay, so let me take everything out. I don't want all these informations I have. Good. So I actually want to see the total profits generated in every country disaggregated by the product. So my country should sit in the rows. Good. So you can see that every country forms a new row this time around. I can drag my products to the columns. Yeah. Now I have a two-dimensional table. I can actually drag my profits to the value, right? So you can see I have a new summary. Good. So now I can see the total profit that has been generated in Egypt for Aquarius. So this, by this, you can see this value here is saying over 1 million. has been generated as profit from just Aquarius in Egypt. You can tell for Chivita in Egypt and so on and so forth. So I was saying something about you can drag whatever field into whatever segment here. You can drag whatever field and place here. Just that certain segments within this within this four chamber, just that certain segments within these four chambers taking specific type of fields, but you can actually place any type of field in any of these segments. So for the value, it's preferable you always insert numerical fields here, but it can actually take in text fields. Just that you definitely are not going to have the sum of text. You can only have the frequency of text, right? So let me just show you what I mean. If I quickly duplicate this one, Control C, for example, then I paste. So let me just take this out. So you can see we have let me take this. So you can see we have country in the rows. So let's say I want to see the total number of entries that has been made for every product at a point in time. So how do I go about that? I can just drag my product and put in values and insert in values. Now, what did you observe? You can see saying count of product because the field, which is labeled product, does not contain numerical values. It actually contains text. And there is no possible way you expect text to be summed or even be calculated as average. So the only thing you can normally get when you insert a text field in the values segment is the count of data within that field. Text and see how many times a particular text reoccurs within that field and it returns the count for all. So in situations whereby you don't really you really just want to find you just probably want to find the count of a particular field which contains text, you can actually drag that field to the values. So I can take this out. Let's just try to drag a numerical field. Profit is a numerical field. Let me drag it to rows and you can see something. What did you see? So you can see that every row contains a particular amount. Whatever field can be dragged to whatever layout. One thing we've not actually touched is the filters. So there are certain informations you might want to filter out when creating your reports, right? Using a pivot table. So let me show you what I mean. So I can duplicate a pivot table like this one. Again, sorry, I'm really a fan of duplicating informations because I feel it's actually straining to have to go back to my data source to create a pivot table over again. So tend to always duplicate this pivot tables and pick up from there. So I can just paste here. Good. So how do I make use of the filter this time around? Let me quickly just take out all these informations. I do not need them presently. So, all right then. So let's say I want to see the total profits generated by every product. Good. So I've dragged my products to the rows. Now I bring my profit to values. Now I can clearly see the total profits that has been generated by every product. But let's say I actually want to see the profit generated by Aquarius for only Egypt. How do I do that? Right? That is where the filter comes in handy. So you can just quickly drag country to filter. Now you'll be filtering this particular pivot table based on the countries or by the countries. You'll be filtering this particular pivot table by the countries. Whenever you insert a field in the filter, it kind of just appears at the top of the pivot table like this. So to add a filter for this pivot table, you tend to see the filter appear at the top somewhere around here like that. So get used to that. Good. So now presently I can see the sum of profit can see the profit generated by Aquarius in all the five countries. But let's say I actually want to see for just Egypt. How do I go about that? So I quickly just come to this drop down, hit on this, and you can select. You see this place which says select multiple items. Click the checkbox. Now on select all and select Egypt. Then hit on OK and you can see the change. Now it has filtered out a specific information. That is, it has filtered out the profits for only Egypt and hid the rest of the other informations. Let's say I actually want to see for Egypt and Nigeria. So you select Egypt, you select Nigeria also, then hit on OK. Now currently you can see the profit generated by Aquarius in Egypt and Nigeria only. So this is how the filter comes in handy for us, right? So you can see these row labels helps you filter out a particular product. The row labels and the column labels. If I hit this drop down, for example, it shows you the list of all the rows present in the pivot table. So you can actually carry out filtering. Procedures using the row labels and column labels respectively. So if I deselect this and I hit on Chivita, observe something, can see it filters out just Chivita and hides the remaining information. So if I were to have a column label, for example, okay, this is a two-dimensional table with a column label. So basically the column label, this drop down, close adjacent to this text, it's going to show us every column present in this particular pivot table, right? So if I click this drop down, you can see a list of all countries present in the pivot table, right? So I can deselect everything, then I select for just Ghana, then I hit on OK. You can see it filters out everything, returning just the values for Ghana alone, right? So that is just basically how a pivot table works. It is quite simple, but when you keep on practicing, you perfect the whole art, right? So let me just undo some of all these things. All right then. So we are not just limited to actually basic pivot table procedures like this. So if you observe something, I can't see my field list anymore because I closed it deliberately. So when you take out your field list like this, how do you bring it back? So just make sure you select the pivot table. You can see this contextual tab at the very top, which is saying pivot table analyze. When you hit on this, at the far right, you can see we have an option which says field list. When I hit on this, you see my field list comes back. All right, then. So there's something I actually want to show us. So there's a possibility of stacking so many fields on top of each other in a particular layout, right? For example, let's say I want to stack countries. I want to stack countries directly above product. How do I do that? All you just need to do is drag your countries to the very top like this and release. You can see you've stacked your country directly above the product. And how did you see the change? You can see even your pivot table reflects the same thing. So this is the profits of every country disaggregated by the products within production within the country, right? So let's say I also want to see the date, right? So I can as well drag this and drop at the bottom like this, right? So you can now see the date has been introduced also, but it's kind of difficult to see what you are doing, right? Because the boxes are kind of small. Now I want to show you how to play around with layouts because there are times where you can stack as many as 7 fields on each other, and with this tiny box it becomes kind of difficult for you to see whatever you are doing. So how do you do that? There is a tool option at the top like this. You can see this place that says tools, or you just have to select this drop down and adjust the field and take in whatever layout you want, right, for your field list. Let's pick this one and let you see something. You can see it kind of expands. You can see it expands all the layouts you have. Now it's now becoming wider, so you can now rearrange to your own taste. If probably you wanted the product to be above the country, you can just drag and drop directly above country, and you can see how that works. And everything you do here will keep reflecting here. So this is just what I wanted to show you. You can always play around with the layouts of your field list depending on how you want it to be. They are all important. That's just the honesty of it. So if I click this one, you can see this one places all your fields. You can see this one places all your fields at the left like that, and the components of the pivot table at the other side of it. That is the right hand side, right? You can decide to probably want to use this one. It depends on what you're trying to see, right? So this one clearly shows only the fields and takes out every other stuff, such as those layouts we've been working with. All right, then. So just always have in mind that you can actually play around with the layout of your field list depending on what you're trying to achieve, right? Because I just showed you an example whereby you might want to stack so many fields directly on top of each other. And with the very first layout we're making use of, you can see we can't really see everything within a particular segment of the pivot table components, right? So I was forced to change to this one so I can see an expanded, you can see how it expanded the height, and you can clearly see whatever field that is within that particular component, right? So that is that. So I can just bring this back to the default layout, right? Okay, so still on the pivot table, you can see if I come back to my pivot table and analyze, there are some certain things we can do here, such as taking out buttons. You can see at the far left, I showed you how to take out the field list, right? So if you click on this, the field list goes. the field list goes. If you click back on that, the field list comes back. And this one here says buttons. So now if you observe, there are certain buttons you have when we stacked, because we stacked fields on top of each other. So Excel, by the pivot table by default, produces buttons to help you expand and collapse. So this buttons, you can see this is a minus. When I hit on it, it kind of collapses everything. Then if I hit on the plus, it expands everything for me. So these are the buttons. So if you don't want them, how do you take them out? All you just have to do is come to the buttons and select, and everything goes. For the field headers, the same thing. The field headers includes the row labels and the column labels respectively. So if you don't want to see this row label title like this, what do? You just have to hit the field headers and it goes. If you want it back, you select the field headers and it comes back. Another thing you can do is you can rename your pivot table. If you're actually conversant with creating dashboards, right, you tend to understand that we place more emphasis on naming pivot tables, right, because it is really, really important, right? So like in a sheet like this where we have so many pivot tables, when creating dashboard when creating a dashboard and trying to create a connection, you tend to see all these pivot tables with very weird names. And if you are not really consistent and if you were not really consistent in naming your pivot tables, you get confused. So it's actually good practice to name pivot tables based on whatever information they are painting, right? So based on whatever information they are actually portraying. So at the far left here, you can see this pivot table. Select the drop down, and you can see this is saying pivot table name. Now the name of this particular pivot table I am on is pivot table 8. It's pivot table 8. So you can actually clear this and give it whatever name you feel is better. So I can call this let's just say profits. I don't really want to think. I can call this profits, and that's good. So you just click on enter, and name of this pivot table currently is profits. So these are just some very basic stuff you can do with pivot tables. In other videos I'll be making, I'll take time to show you other things such as formatting numbers within a pivot table, and doing so many other things like that, inserting slices and so on and so forth. So I remain Kali Shepherd, and I implore you to please like and subscribe to the channel. Thank you.